Hey Cody, how you doing today, man? I appreciate you hopping on the call.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for taking me, man. I'm really excited to work with you and talk about these peptides and, the future ones and kind of the stack that I've been taking.
Awesome, awesome. Um, so first of all, big thanks for being a part of the giveaway. Pretty much really one of the only companies that I promote very much outside of Thorn is Cosmic Nootropic. I mean, I almost to the point I almost feel like a shill, but it's like when you find something that works really well and it's like it works really well for others, it's like you might as well just stick with that one and you know again, it looks like a shield, but at the same
Yeah,
time, it's like if it works, you just keep pumping it. So I've gotten a lot
completely
of good
understand.
feedback from them. Yeah, and they've been awesome, man. Like for this giveaway, um, we were collaborating recently, and I was like, why don't we do something free for everybody? And they were big on board, and they were even cool enough to say like, hey, why don't you pick out what this giveaway looks like? Be to find something that would fit your audience's niche and just to kind of give you a background of understanding what the goal was behind it. And good thing is it fit your needs pretty perfectly is that um, I'm big on brain health. And in the context of bodybuilding, that's really important. Back in the day, everybody was just worried about their liver pretty much.
Right.
Now there's, some individuals that have helped shed light on areas of health that have been neglected in the past in the sport. Brain health has been one of those. Victor Black being a really good resource in some of that regard. That being said, that was part of the reason, part of the driver for selecting for endolutin, which was one of the bioregulatory peptides. Then also, within the context of most of the individuals I work with, which fits well for you, is vent for blood pressure issues or just optimizing for circulation is going to be utterly important for somebody looking to optimize for whether it's performance or aesthetic related needs.
Hmm.
So that being said, my thought process was okay if we use indolute, which can help normalize the circadian rhythms and some of the neurosteroids that are often thrown out of whack during a prep like you're going through right now, we can use a peptide to renormalize so that either during the prep you don't feel as off, or post prep you're able to recover faster, get back to your day to day a little bit faster. And then the thought process with combining that with something like that for it is that we're supporting the vascular system, which is ideal, within the context we just mentioned that there's some challenges in sports like bodybuilding and performance-based sports with the strain that they can place on the vascular system, especially when you start looking at things like chronic blood pressure. That being said, if you're optimizing the vascular system, you're going to allow for improved nutrient delivery. And when I say nutrient, I'm kind of using that as a catch-all for, oxygenation in the blood delivery, peptides, hormones, micronutrients, everything that's needed in order to keep the tissues working optimally. So
Right.
the
Heart
the
health, man.
idea,
Yeah.
do what now?
Heart health, you gotta have that. Yeah.
100%, yeah. And then the idea behind that is if you're supporting the vascular system as a whole, but directly in combination with endolutin, you may be able to further optimize the delivery of endolutin to the target tissues if you're supporting the vascular system.
Interesting. Okay.
This is, purely theoretical on my part. I haven't seen it played out in the data. But that being said, even if it doesn't further potentiate endolutin, at the end of the day, the worst thing that happens is you still support the vascular system. Um, so help me understand, like I know we're recording now, so some other individuals will kind of lost a little bit of the backstory, and I mentioned that you're going through a prep. Like, walk us through a little bit, kind of like what your prep has looked like, some of the challenges that come along, just general challenges that you kind of expect with prep, some of the ones that you've experienced, and kind of the hope for, or what the goal is with leveraging these bioregulatory peptides for that purpose.
Yeah, definitely. I competed earlier this year, and something that I really wanted to start looking into was peptides because I ended up getting shingles just from stress and, low immune system and things like that. And so I'm pretty on top of my diet, pretty on top of vitamin C, vitamin D, the regular nutrients and staying healthy, always washing my hands, being careful around the gym and things like that. But then when you're in such a compromised state with prep and those last couple of weeks where, you're getting close to that 3% body fat, you're flat, you're just tired, you're not moving too terribly much. And then the other factor that I live up in Alaska. And so with the weather changes consistently, and snow and cold, you really kind of have to stay on top of your health, and not only that, mental health. And, I'm a big proponent of encouraging positive mental health because that can derive from the rest of the body. So kind of why I'm really interested in these is this going to help, like you said, this great circadian rhythm. So being able to sleep and, the last 2, 3 weeks of prep does get very difficult. Food's low, energy's low, your body's just going through kind of pure exhaustion point, right? You're trying to burn whatever little bit of fat you have left and to get to the point where you're flat before you carb up before stage. And so everything kind of gets uncomfortable. You can't just, even a comfortable couch becomes uncomfortable. You don't have any body fat. And so sleeping is minimal. And then if you add in any anabolics or other things like that or foods, those can affect your sleep as well. And so when you're only sleeping, you're supposed to get, that 6, 8 hours of sleep uninterrupted. But if you're waking up every 30, 40 minutes because of whatever it might be, and then also if you're low carb, you're peeing all the time, right? Because your hydration's high. And so just trying to help that recover. And like you mentioned with the liver and the kidneys, that was always looked at. And, I used to power lift before and I always took care of that. But until I started researching your channel and Cosmic and some of the other people out there, all that other stuff came together. So gut health was huge. I never knew that gut health played such a huge role into, the rest of the body. And so something that I've dealt with is, inflammation in the upper GI tract or lower GI tract. And I've been kind of chasing that, mainly for recovery base, right? And so, um, yeah,
I'm listening to you.
it's, sorry.
I'm listening to you. I just had a quick battery charge issue.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, so it's uh anything to kind of help with the overall body. And I'm really big into longevity, right? And taking, care of the heart, taking care of the entire system, not just liver, kidneys, it all plays a big role. So, heart health, cholesterol, vein health, all of it. And, then you're playing with other biomarkers that might be against you because of genetics. And so how can we utilize, things like peptides to biohack, and change those genetics. So, in part of my family, we don't have the best. So how can I utilize what Cosmic has to get my step ahead, more so for longevity and secondary bodybuilding. But, if I can look good while doing it, why not?
I love
Yeah.
it. So funny. One thing you mentioned earlier was just talking about how just being that lean can just be so uncomfortable. How's walking around? Have you lost all the fat on the padding of your feet yet?
Right. Yeah. And so that's difficult. No shoes are real comfortable. You're walking real slow, or even stepping off curbs sometimes where you're bouncing around now, I'm like kind of like an old man, kind of taking it slow, but yeah.
Your glutes are going, so it feels like you're sitting on bones.
Oh yeah. When I sit down now, there's no cushion. It goes straight to the tank,
Yeah,
basically. It's just like, yeah.
very cool. So let's the good thing is like I don't it doesn't need to be super complex. Going back to what you've mentioned is some of the dysregulation that occurs within the context of bodybuilding, and we can look at that from two sides of the coin regard, for anybody watching, if you're an enhanced athlete uh or a set competitor and you're getting ready to go on stage, a lot of times you're going to have a high level of dopaminergic signaling from the inclusion of anabolics, but oftentimes they're dropping their estrogen very low. And so you don't have that inhibitory effect from estrogen to help maintain part of that brain health. Um, then on the flip side, if you have an all natural aesthetic competitor, they're not having like their whole endocrine profile is pretty much crashing. Like you don't have any testosterone. You definitely don't have any estrogen because you don't have much testosterone to convert into estrogen.
Yeah.
And so you run into a very similar issue. Well, I say it's similar. It's not similar because the endocrine profile has crashed on one and the other. It's very skewed in one direction. Regardless, the outcomes can potentiate brain-related issues as well as other tissue issues throughout the body. Whether it be the heart or the liver or whatever it might be. So you bring up a really good point there around that dysregulation. And whether it's in a natural athlete, when the brain becomes that depleted, when it's not receiving those signals, essentially, that hormones are providing in the peptides, you start to get obviously problems, whether it's going to be mood related issues, whether it's like cognition, just general cognition, like brain fog type stuff. And then you can likely measure some level of aging of the brain. Now, it's quite likely that with a methodical focus, you can reverse that aging, assuming it's short-lived. Pretty much everything in life, um, you can apply that concept of the poison is in the dose. And to kind of like compound on that, the poison is in the dose, but it's also in the duration and the frequency of the dose as well. So when we're looking at something like brain aging that may be coming slightly premature, from going from these body fat extremes, we can possibly use peptides and other things to reverse and mitigate some of that damage along the way. So within the context of the ones you've got, I would go the route personally, and I've seen others do it, but it's completely up to you for your application. And the reason I provide that is, I guess for a general disclaimer, is that this is for entertainment purposes. Like none of this is prescriptive in nature, and nobody should go and just use something without doing some research, without consulting, and then without speaking with their physician about it first. Now, the good thing about bioregulatory peptides, the risk profile I'm not going to say it's non-existent, but I'm not aware of any risk that I have personally seen. There's some really good papers by Dr. Covinson out of Russia, I believe. He was the original guy, and the way it started out was they were taking peptides and essentially using tissues from animals, extracting the constituents of that tissue, distilling it down, and isolating the peptides. Later, they figured out we don't have to extract them from animals. We can create these synthetically. And so you have cytogens, you have cytomaxes, you have different categories of these bioregulatory peptides, whether they're sublingual, whether they're oral, whether they are synthetic or animal derived. So, excuse me, the complexity piece is, I don't think is important. You're going to need likely a stronger, I guess you're going to need a little bit heavier of a hit, so to speak, to try and re-regulate when you come off. So you'll notice. Do you have the actual product with you?
I do.
So,
So I
or
got the event for it and then the end.
okay, perfect. So on the back, I believe for both of them, it's going to say 1 to 2 times a day of 1 to 2 capsules a day.
Right.
Yep. So in my
Yeah,
in
the
the
Venport
experience,
says 2 to 4 capsules or 1 to 2 capsules. Yeah, 2 times. Yeah, both of them are like that. Okay. Yep.
yep. So um, with something like this, in my opinion, it's better to stick closer to the guidelines. Um, that being said, the risk profile is nearly non-existent with these. That doesn't mean, throw all caution to the wind. But that being said, if we stay within the guidelines, the risk profile that we are looking at is going to be consistent with the studies, which is, again, almost non-existent.
Right.
Um, and then within that context, we can then look at, okay, so what has the manufacturer or what have the studies let us understand based on the findings? And so if we can just use the top range of the dose, stay within the healthy risk profile and gain the benefits of the product. These are can be expensive products. I believe that Fort and Indolutin are both, I think, over $100 a piece.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
They're
like
pretty pricey.
$300 a product right there. Yeah. So um, when you're doing it, you want to use it at a time where you can be focused, make sure that you've got proper adherence and the other lifestyle factors are in place. And since you're the type of individual that has the level of discipline to be a bodybuilder, none of that is a concern. So we don't have to talk about strategy with that with you. For you, it'll be as simple as, okay, after I come off in the show, I set my post show strategy in place as it relates to training, recovery, diet, all of that good stuff. And then we just add in a layer of bringing in these bioregulatory peptides. Um, the way I would suggest doing it is, starting out first thing in the morning, have your morning dose. If you're doing any like supplements in the morning that are to be taken with water only, like not with food, go ahead and have those first. And then when you're taking your food, the bioregulatory peptides can be added to that meal.
Okay.
And then the way that I've found value in it personally is using the next one at the evening meal. Um, and then usually after a few days, you'll start to see things normalize. So the way that would look, let's just say, I think you said you're competing tomorrow. Is that right?
Saturday, yes, the ninth.
Saturday. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting my days mixed up here.
No,
So
it's
then on Sunday, start, get up, have your first supplements. If you do fasted cardio, great. Then you sit down and have a meal, few hours after wake and like a legitimate meal. You maybe you've had a shake or something before that. And then you have your um, 2 capsules of each, so 4 capsules total of your bioregulatory peptides. And then, maybe around somewhere between 4 and 7 p.m., whenever, depending on your meal timing, have your other 2 of each, and that'll be 4 capsules. There's
okay.
60 capsules in each bag. So or excuse me, in each package. So if you're doing 4 a day, that'll give you right at 2 weeks worth. That should be enough time to renormalize coming off of an incident like that in a healthy individual. And I would absolutely consider you a healthy individual based on the feedback from your lifestyle.
Definitely try to be. Okay. And so, yeah, that's perfect because usually I do a fasted cardio, come home, have a bigger meal. So take it with the meal. Is there anything that I should avoid taking with it? How some, over-the-counter supplements say, oh, don't take with this, don't take with that. Um,
N- through the research I've looked at, I haven't seen any contraindications.
okay.
It's
And
not to
then,
say that there aren't any out there, but again, the risk profile of this is so low. The only thing I might would suggest, and again, this is purely theoretical on my part, is not taking in a lot of acids with it. So like like for me, a lot of times I'll use lemon and lime with my meal. Like if I'm
okay.
doing like some cilantro rice with some chicken for one of my meals, I'll squeeze a bunch of lime all over it to keep it acidic. Or if I'm making a smoothie, I'll put a bunch of lemon and lime in it because that acid helps break down some of the foods and stuff. Now, these peptides are should survive that first part of the digestive tract so that they can actually get in and be absorbed. My only thought, and again, purely theoretical, my only thought is that if the acidity environment is raised higher than what the baseline acidity environment is of the stomach, you may possibly affect the integrity of those peptides.
Understood. Okay. So, because one thing I'm doing to help kind of gut and then also hydration is doing apple cider vinegar, lemon juice, and aloe vera juice, kind of post cardio, and then about 20 to 30 minutes and mixed with 10 grams glutamine, right? And about 20 minutes later, I'll have that meal, but I'll have some coffee. So you're right, my acidity levels would be higher in that first meal. Would it be beneficial off your theoretical is maybe wait to the second meal to do so? So then I'm looking more at maybe a 10:30 a.m. and then probably a 7 p.m. dose.
Yeah, I like that. And again, purely theoretical on my part.
Okay.
It could be, way over the top, trying to, navigate that minutia. But it kind of goes back to I'm a cheat guy. So it goes back to my mindset of like, these are expensive products. If
Oh
there's
yeah.
something that I think might make a subtle change, I'll probably do it.
I'm right there with you, man. Oh, 100%. So then, yeah, because then that begs the other question too, because I'm really excited to start these and kind of see the difference. Not to bounce around, but real quick with the Ventfort, is it still okay to take with Cialis? So one thing for heart health, I take 5 mgs Cialis daily. That shouldn't affect anything.
No, you should be fine with that.
Okay. Then I am
In
planning
fact,
on competing in like 5 weeks after this. So this would be a perfect in between, or would you wait until after that show?
either or. I mean, if the okay, I was going to segue later into the conversation around this, but I think it makes sense to do it now. I think what I would do now, if I was Cody and I was, you know, my timeline looked like yours, I think I would go ahead first show. incorporate the indilutin and vent for it. And then second show, I might would look into a product similar like a cerebrolizin or a cortexin.
I'm very
And
interested with those. Yeah.
I'm huge fans. If you've seen, some of my pages before, those are probably the ones I talk most about.
Yeah.
And then you've also got one called active edging. These are targeting different areas of the brain, but they do assist with kind of like a global nervous system health, so to speak. I really like them. I've heard too many anecdotes of people that have had positive benefit from it. I've had a couple people say, I noticed nothing. Okay. Very, very, like literally, when I say a couple, probably two or three at most. I've had the majority of people say, you know what, like I didn't notice anything for like a week. But starting around week two, like I started noticing like little things like, my mood just was more level. I like just not quite as responsive or reactive to stressful situations. Not only that, but similar to endolutin, like a reset of the circadian rhythm, allowing for that sleep cycle to restore properly. I've also heard individuals and can speak from personal experience that the general like kind of focus and drive to do things, which is likely related somewhat to, dopamine signaling in the brain, correcting and restoring that proper signaling process. I noticed personally with myself that I would come home from work in the afternoons, and usually when I'm like, I don't feel like doing anything else. Let's cook some, talk to my wife, let's cook some food and chill on the couch and make sure the kids are good and just chill this evening. Whereas like come home after like week two of that, and it's like, you know what? I'm gonna put the dishes up, see if the kids want to take a walk around the block, and it's not like a caffeine energy. It's just like your baseline energy. It just doesn't, and I don't know if it's as much energy. It's just like the mental piece doesn't wane as the day goes on. But when you near that bedtime, it's like, I can ease into sleep, no problem. It's kind of an interesting effect for me. I'm in that group of individuals where it's subtle and incremental over time.
Mhm.
But after like, week three, I kind of find my baseline with it. And then that the benefits from it seem to last for several months after.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. And then I've also, you do get the rare cases too, where the individual's like, holy cow, man, like I was, anxious as crap yesterday and, whatnot. And I started my first administration this morning, and literally within minutes, I started to notice a feeling of calm. Or if it wasn't anxiety, I had terrible brain fog. I started to notice the fog clear. There are those. It's not regular, but it's compelling enough to where the bell curve is, and the benefits within the bell curve, even though they are subtle and incremental, the I guess what you would say, like the breadth of impact, meaning like it's not usually just affecting or improving one area of your life. So if
Right.
you're got a little bit of brain fog, if you've got a little bit of anxiety, if you've got a little bit of focus issues, if you've got a little bit of just like that mental stamina throughout the day, you'll notice like each one of those things gets just a little bit better. And then week two, it's just a little bit better. And week three, it's just a little bit better until your baseline went from here to here on week two. And then week three, you're not quite as big of a jump, but you're still making improvements. On week four, you're really kind of just you're coasting off of all that progress you've made over those first few weeks and kind of solidifying it so that you can continue to receive or experience that progress over the next several months. So to go back and wrap a nice little bow around
Yeah.
all that I've just regurgitated on you is I think the first show, it wouldn't be a terrible idea to go ahead and incorporate Ventfort and Interlude. And then in the second show, look to something like cerebrolizing or cortexin that is a little bit more affordable. And if you get just as big or even a bigger bang for your buck, like, hey, in my toolbox now, I've got this new great tool that every time I do a show, I can re-regulate. And we can use the cerebralizing or cortexin somewhat as a substitute for something like Indolutin.
Hmm.
Again, they do work somewhat differently, but there's a lot of crossover there as well. And then for something like a vent port, we can come in and attempt to substitute it with something like an active edge. which is also much more affordable. The only thing I would warn against with Activegen is a lot of individuals do complain about pip with it. Um, I have noticed it myself, but it for me, I have one client whose the pip was to the point he was like, nope, no more.
Can't do
Everybody else is
it.
like, yeah, everybody else is like, oh, I can tolerate it. For me, it's like about a 30 seconds to maybe 2 minutes of where it's like, that didn't like that, but then it's gone. It's like, okay, no big deal.
Interesting. Can you make it makes it with more backwater to kind of make it less pippy or
Probably, but I probably wouldn't mess with the preparations the way it is.
well, like if you drew it into a needle, like a bigger syringe, right, and then drew some extra backwater to help with it. I don't know. Some I've done with like glutathione, for example, or NAD, because sometimes that burn or that pip with I added like an extra mil of backwater and it took it away.
It makes sense. And like if you're comparing it to something like let's just say something BPC like 157, a lot
Mhm.
of people are familiar with that one. So if you're using backwater, there's no effect on that benzyl alcohol, the bacteriostatic agents in there that are helping preserve the sterility. There's no effect on effect. Oh, excuse me. There's no effect on the peptide. I would assume that would reign true for Activegen as well, but I just don't know. So I would probably personally just err on the side of I'll just deal with it for the next minute or two until the pit goes away. But it wouldn't hurt to try. I mean, it's not expensive. I think like a week's worth. It's not cheap, but comparatively to something like Indoleuk, like a week's worth, I think it's like 30 or 40 bucks.
Yeah, and you make a lot of good points, and because that's something that I've been really interested in, and a couple of my friends as well that are bodybuilders because again, up here in Alaska, we're getting into the season now where we're getting, maybe 4 to 6 hours of sunlight. And so those that aren't super active in the snow, it gets a pretty dark space. And so depending on if you keep yourself busy or not, and then circadian rhythm, right? So you're tired all the time because there's no sunlight. So you have to keep yourself busy or get happy lights and things like that. And then another thing that I do is I'm an engineer, so I work from home, but I have to be on top of it. And so sometimes these preps do get rough, and I've had to work with my coach saying, "Hey, I got a big meeting with, VPs today. I have to have some extra fats for this 2 hour meeting, right? I can't just look at it like zombie mode when they're asking me questions on how to design these, whatever I might be designing." So yeah, I'm really interested in this. I'll butcher it, cerebroliasin, yeah, as well. And then you make a good point too. That's not something that you have to take staple like vitamin D every single day. It's something that'll stay with you. And so I'm really interested in that because like bodybuilding isn't forever. You have to regulate, your relationships and your work and everything around it. And those that have very, very active jobs or very, very brain powered jobs. I wouldn't be able to afford bodybuilding if I didn't have my job. So, I got to make those things work.
Yeah, you make a good point there because it's kind of funny. Like I joke about it, like being an action hero. Like by day, I'm a data analyst for a large forklift manufacturer, and I look at just general operations. Like I have to dig into data to say like, okay, well, customer A is we're seeing this issue, and here's how you fix it. Based off of the data that we're seeing. It's kind of tedious at
Yeah.
times, and it can monopolize quite a bit of brain power. Um, and so when you get to that point of depletion, you need that help, like you were saying with the healthy fats. One thing I wanted to ask, and I know we're getting a little bit away from the conversation around peptides, but have you tinkered with MCT oils for that purpose?
I have. So, macadamia nut oil, MCT oil, olive oil works pretty good for me. And I'm just trying to be very, very careful for the gut. So I'm not doing any extra stuff. But yeah, even coconut oil, I love adding in. So things like that just to help regulate stuff, especially once I start dropping fiber to keep motility high. Just kind of
Yeah,
keep some of those fats for stuff moving.
yeah. The reason I've called out MCT oil specifically, and you may already be aware, the individual, the guy that ran the Bulletproof Coffee Company, Dave Asprey,
Mhm.
um, you love him or hate him, regardless, he did come out with some decent products and he did put out some decent information. He's also over exaggerated some stuff and cherry picked some stuff too. But when in the context of MCT oils, he created a C8 product, which is the C8 is just a reference to the carbon chain length of the MCT. Most MCT oils are C8 and C10. If you get one that's purely C8, that seems to help with the ketones that affect brain power.
Hmm.
So if you get a C8 MCT oil, and there's a few good ones, there's a couple good ones on Amazon, but I have found those when it comes to needing that extra pump in the brain, that C8 MCT oil specifically blend like, a tablespoon or, whatever your macros allow for into like your coffee, maybe with a little bit of protein like that. I do that with a lot of my clients, especially ones that don't like breakfast. I'm like, okay, do you like coffee? Great. Do you
Yeah.
like, you know, vanilla or chocolate? Okay, great. Put a scoop of that, here's your coffee, put a tablespoon of MCT oil, and this will at least get a few calories in to start the day, and you get that zip from it because you get a little bit of the caffeine, but then that those ketones just really, I mean, it's like adding what is it, nitrous to a car almost.
Right. Yeah, it's like a little boost, like, all right, I can think. Yeah.
100%. And then when you also mentioned, the importance around gut health, and the post show can always be an interesting challenge with trying to restore that gut health. A lot of the microbiome has been pruned down pretty low because of the lower variety of foods, the lower volume of foods, um, and some other things that go along with the prep that are affecting it. That being said, I don't know if you've looked at like some quality probiotics. I know Seed makes one. There's a couple other companies that make some really good ones. But something as simple as, if you tolerate probiotic foods really well, things like sauerkrauts and miso and kimchi's. If you have those available to you, those are going to be some decent ideas to toss very slowly back into the mix. The reintroduction has to be subtle with those. Like just sit down and eat a jar of sauerkraut. It's gonna,
Right.
ooh,
Oh,
you will
just blow
not
it right
feel
away.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you add like a spoonful or a forkful in with your meals, and I like that you're already doing the apple cider vinegar. Is that the one with the mother in it?
The one from Costco, the natural one that you really have to shake, otherwise, because it's got all the stuff at the bottom. Yep.
Good. Okay. Yeah. So you'll see sometimes I'll say with the mother on the side, and that's just
Yeah.
referring to the colony of the all the bacteria and stuff in there.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to double
And
check on
if
the Costco one, but that's what I remember.
if you've got all that sediment in there, 99% sure that you've got the right one. So that's awesome. Keep using that because that'll help with maintaining some level of gut flora in there. Um, but it also has the added benefit of increasing the acidity of the gut to help with the digestion as well. So the fact that you're doing that already is awesome. Adding in, you'll add in those prebiotic fibers post show, so that when you are taking in probiotics, they've got something to actually feed on and start recolonizing in the gut or the gastric tract as a whole. So I like that. Awesome.
Yeah. And something I'm dealing with a little bit is that upper GI that I noticed. So, because I was taking care of Candida, and I think some of the Candida cause a small amount of SIBO. And so I'm playing around with that. And that would be the only showstopper for nationals is if, hey, if I'm battling SIBO, I'm battling some gut stuff, I'm not even going to try to push it. I need to heal my gut and then restart because otherwise I'm going to be playing this, you know, balance game all the way through when I'd rather be 100%. So, but yeah, even all the probiotics I take is through Claire or some other pretty well-known companies, and I have a uh, doctor here that prescribes them, and I can get it pretty good through full script. And yeah, I love utilizing those. The kimchi pickles are actually one of the ones from Cars. Those are one of
Nice.
my favorites, man. I like spice. I'm from Texas, so like any extra little spice, I'm all about. Yeah.
Very cool. So let's see. What part of Texas are you from?
I was born and raised in Houston and then San
Okay.
Antonio. Yeah.
I lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for about 10 years before I moved back to North Carolina. I really enjoyed Texas. It's a cool place to live.
Oh yeah, both of those spots, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, with regard to the probiotic foods, one thing I would say is your best bet is to get ones that have, or depending on how you respond to it, I guess, is to get one where there's what's done a wild ferment, what's called a wild ferment. a lot of times what they'll do, fermented food companies will just get a bacterial culture of like maybe 5 different bacteria and they'll put it in the
Mhm.
food. Whereas if you do a wild ferment, you're essentially allowing a larger variety of the bacteria in the environment to inoculate that food. So you have a broader variety of bacteria, creating a little bit more balance there, which is going to be more indicative of what you see, in your own microbiome, which
No,
is going to be that
interesting.
variety. Yeah. The the thought concept behind only if you've only got like maybe let's say like 3 strains of bacteria in there, you've got thousands and thousands of different kinds of microbes in your gut. So if you just continuously bang the gastric tract with, these 3 or these 4 bacteria, you're creating almost like if you think about it like agriculture, you're creating almost like a monocrop environment that's going to create an imbalance in there. So creating that variety when you can is ideal. Bubby's is a brand that makes a wild fermented food product, and Wild Brine, they both make wild fermented foods, so you might want to look into those. Um,
Okay.
and you won't be able to do this before the next show. Well, you could, might not be ideal, but if you find that the SIBO is still present post show, second show, and it's just not going away, one thing you can try to is to do a brief fast. It's not super ideal in the context of bodybuilding, but what fasting will do will prune back that microbiome even more. It's probably pruned a bit already, but if you're essentially not feeding the bacteria, they're going to start to die off. And
Yeah.
then you can reintroduce a more balanced microbe profile through some of your foods and then your environmental interactions.
And I'd
So
rather
that's
do
a,
that than nuke it with antibiotics. And I've done that before and that sucked. That took
yeah,
a long time to kind of get back to it. And I'm right there with you. I try to, if I buy one probiotic, I look through the strains and then try to get different strains each time. And so I'm like, okay, I'll take this one for this month, this one for next, or like alternate them through the week or something like that. So,
yeah. One other thing I'll do too is I'll keep the brine afterwards. And like
yeah.
I might toss some jalapenos and I pull some jalapenos out of the fridge, chop them up, throw them back in that brine, and I'll reuse the brine and it'll essentially ferment those as well. So you can do that so you don't have to constantly buy a
Oh
new
yeah. Do the same
probiotic.
thing. Yeah. Recut pickles
Nice.
and put them in there. Yeah. Even cucumbers, stuff like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, look, man, if it's okay with you, we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. Actually, before we do that, were there some questions that we haven't touched on yet that you have that we can dive into?
I mean that's awesome about the interleukin and the Mentor. I'm very interested in this cerebolized, and I'm going to butcher that every time. Definitely going to look into taking that after the second show, or if that second show doesn't work out, probably add it in right after these two. The other one that I was interested in that Cosmic was carrying, talking about gut health, was the BPC, and I've heard a lot of oral BPC compared to injectable BPC. What's your thoughts on that for, helping the gut biome there?
I don't think Cosmic carries BPC
Or they don't.
specifically. No, no, but regardless, BPC I think is phenomenal. In fact, with a lot of my bodybuilders, a lot of them take it prophylactically instead of waiting for the injury to occur. They might do like a 5 milligram administration once a month to prevent, to address those tiny little injuries that are occurring in the background that really haven't. They're like little micro tears and stuff like that that are forming that really
Yeah,
haven't bubbled up enough to really cause discomfort so you don't know it's there and you can and so there's a strategy to potentially take them out or address them before it occurs.
but not
um
injectable. I'm in oral, like so oral BPC. Yeah.
yep, yeah, I was
Okay.
getting off track a little bit there. So if we start looking at now, you usually hear 3 different things in the context of BPC. You'll hear oral, sub-Q, or site. um it's really all over the place. What I have found more often than not is that oral seems to bias the healing properties towards the gastric tract.
Okay.
I know I saw something with Dr. Goodness, I've forgotten his name, where he was claiming a lot of his patients were getting gut health improvements just from sub-Q administrations. Personally, I've noticed that people have a more impact with the oral administration, but if you're in the camp of individuals that gets it from the sub-Q administration as well, you're probably getting added benefit from both the global benefits that you're getting throughout the body as well as the gastric benefits from the peptide. just personally, I find more people get it from an oral administration. Now, when we look at it from sub-Q versus site, I was always of the mindset that just go sub-Q, it'll go systemic. But I have had enough individuals tell me that they tried sub-Q and it helped, but it wasn't really like the kind of sledgehammer to knock things out. And when they went with the site administration, if they were able to get close enough to the site, then they found safely,
Yeah.
they found that they got a bigger impact there. So it's a toss up. Some
Mhm.
people say nope, sub-Q worked just fine. So it's really tinkering, but I think for me, if I was dealing with gut health, I would go with an oral administration, and
Okay.
that can come in a capsule. If you don't have a capsule, you can use the liquid and just straight down the mouth.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Um, and then the other thought
Which
too, I'm
which
sorry.
could possibly too. You could also do like a nasal administration, and while that might not be the bias towards the gut, it could also help support the brain health as well.
Oh yeah, I've seen that from like amino asylum and things like that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then would you ever recommend taking like the cerebrolist? Gosh, I can never
Cerebro. Think of it like this. You remember the X-Men character Cerebro?
Cerebro, yeah. Yeah.
So all you do is put lysine on the end of that. Cerebro
Cerebral
lysine.
license, cerebral license. All right, I'll remember that now. Dude, that's bad. Yeah, prep brain, dude, that's what I'll blame it on. But anyway, so something like that, coming in towards the end of prep, like the last month. I know we talked about, post show, but would that be something to incorporate possibly during the last little bit? Because I know it's one of those things everyone's, even the old school guys have said, hey, if you're not suffering and you're not like a zombie, you're not doing it right. Well, I kind of argue with that. Like you can still be happy and live a life and do all these other things. I know it's tough. You bust your ass in the gym and the kitchen and everything else, but adding some other peptide to help, brain health, but also, you sleep, would that be beneficial? And then, at least for like the last month or something of a bodybuilding prep.
Yeah, so the way I would handle that is whenever going into prep, obviously you don't want to change anything. You already want to know how you respond to everything, whether it's food, whether it's training, whether it's sleep, whatever it is, you want to know how you respond because you don't want any variables that you can't account for. So if I were going to use it in a prep, I would first use it outside of the prep window and see how I respond. Does it cause any type of change in aesthetics? Do I notice a subtle change in water retention, anything like that? You shouldn't.
Yeah.
I've never heard that side effect, but you still just want to be careful to see if you're the special snowflake that has this one symptom. And if like if it causes you to put on, like 2 pounds of water, you know, probably not a big deal. You would just pull it out a week before. But if it causes, again, never heard of anybody, but I'm just saying in general with anything, you know, you want to test things out well before that prep. And if you find that it does work well and there's nothing that would interfere with your aesthetic appeal, then I would say absolutely toss it in.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Man, I'm really looking forward to it. So, yeah.
Cool. Um, there was one other thing I was going to say, and I'll remember it about the time we get off the call, so I'll message you
No,
because I
no
can't
worries.
remember what that was. Was there
On
another question?
peptides? Was it on peptides? Was it on food, gut?
I'm telling you, as soon as we get off the call, I'll remember it and then I'll
Right.
message you.
That's good.
And I think you said you had another question. Did you have one?
I think you answered it. Yeah, it was taking those and prior, and then you covered the BPC, so that's really interesting to me. Um, yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, no, I really appreciate you and Cosmic sending me these. So I'm
Awesome.
excited to test them out and get a good review going.
And I do remember now. I didn't have to wait before the end of the call. So going back to your comment around, the old school, you got to suffer. I don't know anybody that can get on stage, even if they're using lots of ergogenic aids, that hasn't suffered. So you're going to suffer regardless. Um, that being said, just because 50 years ago they didn't have the right tools in order to mitigate some of the damage, doesn't mean that we shouldn't use them. It doesn't make sense. Like I don't know if you've seen one of the recent casts with can't remember what they call those casts, but it's with Vigorous Steve, Dr. Dean St. Martin, and shoot, Kurt Havens, Dr. Kurt Havens. or actually he's a PhD candidate. He's not a doctor yet. So I think just Kurt Havens. That being said, all three really sharp guys, but um, they have been looking at, some of the supplements, research chemicals and peptides that can be used for mitochondrial enhancement and how that affects your energy, your ability to maintain mood and stress resilience, your ability to maintain continued fat loss and kind of prevent some of those plateaus along the way
Oh,
for
interesting.
that purpose. And to me, it makes a lot of sense to eh, to approach it. Obviously, you want to try things in isolation, and you want to see how am I affected by this in isolation, and then very slowly and methodically you fold things together and compound them together just to make sure you don't have any issues. And if you can effectively do that without any issues, or you have to identify certain things that work best for you, after that you can create little stacks or tools in your tool cabinet and say, well, at this point in my prep or this point post prep, I can interject with this and it will help me address this. And to me, it makes the most sense. It goes back to the old adage of work smart, not hard. So
Exactly. Of
if we can reduce some of the negatives of the prep, it's still going to be freaking hard. Still takes a ton of discipline.
course.
But why don't we improve the ability of or improve the opportunity of the outcome by adding some of these ergogenic aids and quite possibly mitigate some of the damage along the way as well.
Right, and that's more important to me, longevity. Yeah, because if you're damaging your brain throughout prep, it's not worth it to me. I don't want to be an Alzheimer's patient at 50. So,
um, if you're, it's interesting you mentioned that because cerebral lysin has been looked in that context. There's a protein called the amyloid beta plaque protein that is a hallmark trait that you see in Alzheimer's progression. I don't think there's any indications right now of whether that's the cause or a correlative. But that being said, there is evidence that cerebral lysin can help clear out part of that amyloid beta plaque. So
oh
that's really
wow.
cool too. And
Yeah.
I've got a family history of Alzheimer's, so I already looked into that.
Yeah, yeah. That'd be huge. Yeah, and same for me, I have a family history of like MS here and there, and so some white matter in the brain. And last scan I had is I had a few, and luckily it didn't go down my spine by any means. So very thankful for that. But anything to kind of help clear up some of that white matter, or just enhance the neuron firing, that's I'm all for.
Well, I tell you what, man, it sounds like we have a lot of similar interests. Like I love understanding how you can push the performance, but also keep a very close eye on maintaining health and longevity as well. I'm trying to figure out how to find that balance point between those two. Um, once you get done with this second show, um, why don't we reconnect and look at talking through how do we come out of the show effectively, from a just, gut health standpoint, from a brain kind of renormalization standpoint, and then what are some of the sustainable practices that can be used in tandem with bodybuilding practices that will either mitigate some of the damage that comes from bodybuilding or just support general longevity practices.
Right, right. I love that, man. I really appreciate that.
That'd be awesome, man. So you've got my scheduling link. So that's not like a single use link. You can bookmark that if you want, and then
Okay.
let's just stay in contact. And maybe here in a few weeks after that next show, let's reconnect and talk through a strategy, kind of that show exit plan strategy.
Definitely, man. I like that.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, Cody, I really appreciate your time today. I really appreciate you participating in the giveaway. It helps Cosmic, it helps me, and in return, it's had an opportunity for you. So again, very much appreciate that. And another shameless plug and shout out for Cosmic. They have been super helpful and supportive of me whenever I've wanted to do something. I've done a couple giveaways with them. Their customer service has been outstanding. Anytime I've had a question or just wanted to test something out, they've been super helpful with me as well. So, a little shameless plug for them over at Cosmic. They're a great group. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to Cosmic Nootropic directly. They do a really good job of responding back pretty quickly with adequate detail. You're more than welcome to reach out to me as well. If anybody's interested, you can go through Instagram, go to the website. There's an application page on the website. So, um, but yeah, Cody, let's reconnect here again in a little while. And you've also got my contact information through Signal. So let's just continue to bat stuff back and forth. If you have anything come up where you got some questions, send it over and let's work through that.
Absolutely, man. Thank you, Tyler, and thank you, Cosmic, man. And I really appreciate y'all. So
Awesome.
looking forward to it.
Well, look, man, send me some pictures after the show if you can.
We'll do. Hopefully bring home that overall one more time. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, good luck, brother, and try and get some sunlight.
all right, we'll do it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Later, my man.
Bye.